This is Communications Workshop 20W, and this is Jared Carter's Persuasive Speech. And my speech is about creation versus evolution. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God created every living creature that moves, and every winged fowl, and God saw that it was good. And God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth." Genesis chapter 1, 1 through 26, the King James Version. I'm going to disprove evolution relating to the existence of man. I'll prove creation in the face of man's limited understanding and fear of something greater than them. Some of you may have heard about the long-standing debate that has existed since almost the beginning of man. Some of you may have even begun to learn about the theory of evolution in school, but the theory has never actually told you how life has actually began. The school and evolutionists begin evolution from somewhere in the middle, and then they work their way out. Well, the answer to this question is simple. They do not know how life began unless they admit to the actual truth that God exists. In 1953, Stanley Miller did an experiment which completely rocked the debate on evolution and creation. According to this experiment, he was able to show how gases will form from amino acids. The scientific industry was in an uproar of joy, expressing man is just as powerful as God in creating something from nothing. Well, getting amino acids to form from gases is a great discovery. It's just too bad God had already done it. The thing man has not been able to do is get those same gases to produce protein, or substance from those amino acids. As you may already know, proteins never form outside of living things. Their claim is a bit like claiming wood formed in nature and can get together on their own and build houses. So pretty much you have just a stack of wood, and they all communicate with each other and say, well, we're going to build a house together without any other outside influence. That's the same thing of what they're talking about here. During my speech, I'm going to talk about three main points. I'm going to talk to you about biogenesis, DNA, and information on DNA. I'll briefly describe biogenesis. The principle of biogenesis states that living things only come from other living things. Abiogenesis is the exact opposite of that. So it states that living things don't come from other living things. This is more of an atheist point of view. Since we have just learned protein can only be formed from other living things inside their individual cells, I will now show you how DNA and RNA relate to the subject of creation. Thomas Hines states, amino acids will not link together to form proteins. You see, there are two kinds of proteins. There's the left-handed protein, and then there's the right-handed protein. Only proteins containing all left-hand amino acids will work in living things because proteins which contain any right-handed amino acids have the wrong shape and will not connect properly to the proteins around them. It's kind of like taking a puzzle piece and taking it completely out of the correct spot it's already in, turning it upside down, and trying fitting it. It's still the same size, still the same shape, but trying to put it directly back into that same spot of a puzzle. It just doesn't work. It's not going to go together. Only the left-handed amino acids are formed by living things. An evolutionist argument states creation is not supported by science. I just showed you a portion of how it is. A biogenesis scientist attempts to duplicate creation of life by cloning. The cloning process takes cells from a created being and applies them into a petri dish and combines them together. Consider this. By scientists attempting to make or create evidence to disprove the very fact of creation, are they not themselves proving a form of creation? For instance, the scientist Stanley Miller in 1953 produced a chemical reaction producing a single amino acid, thus from an intelligent being created a scenario for everything to line up perfectly on a specific day and date in a controlled environment. To produce one single amino acid and none of which are left-handed. What kind of controlled environment and what kind of factors would a creator have to have in order to get both the left-hand sided and the right-hand sided amino acids to line up perfectly to get DNA to form with RNA? The fact is, God spoke it into existence, and the deity, God, according to the most proved historical document in the world, God was and is to come. DNA is the structure of cells in a living creature. Think of it as a movie. Think of RNA as think of DNA as a movie store, and then think of RNA as the actual movie that you rent from the store. RNA checks up information to line up left-handed amino acids in the exact order required for each protein with right-handed amino acids. They then link and form protein. Scientists are not able to make DNA in a laboratory. Heinz writes, because no machine exists that did not have an intelligent inventor, each of the cell's machines is another evidence for an intelligent creator. Thomas refers to the cells which make up a living being. He calls these cells molecular machines. According to Principles and Explorations, written by George B. Johnson and Peter H. Raven, which are biologists, in a book published by Holt, Reinhardt, and Winston, stated, scientists have not been able to cause amino acids dissolved in water to join together to form proteins. The energy requiring chemical reactions that join amino acids are reversible and do not occur spontaneously in water. However, most scientists no longer argue that the first proteins assemble spontaneously. Instead, they now propose that the initial macromolecules were composed of RNA and that RNA later catalyzed the formation of proteins. Scientists are now adopting the proposition that RNA might form in the specific way that I just described. RNA and DNA are nucleotides, or a little like amino acids making protein. Iris Fry states in The Emergence of Life on Earth in 2000, water greatly interferes with the linking of amino acids and nucleotides into chains, a crucial step in the origin of life. As you can see by the argument scientists are using, they are continuing to prove themselves wrong. They are using science to prove creation, which is kind of opposite of what they're attempting to do, but they're doing it. In the process, they're leading more and more people away from actually believing in a creator as they get closer to finding that it is actually creation. They are spurred by pride of life, and if they are able to admit that there's a creator, then they know that they will have to be accountable to something or someone. Is it not this way with every life form, though? Is there not a governing authority in every single living being? A mama bear instructs her young, a bird cares for her chicks, and a family cares for their children. By a mammal instinct, the fact remains it started from a creator. It is a creator who gave us the ability to procreate, which in a way kind of gives scientists a godlike feeling and instruction. I brought you through a huge box of scientific jargon relating to biogenesis and DNA. Now I'm going to provide you with information. Information regarding DNA is very important, especially since the current evolution argument centers on this. They believe people evolved from something previously living, such as single-celled amoeba or organisms. They never address where the actual being started. If they are not able to address the formation of organisms, they are not able to wrap their minds around the fact a creator created every living being. The DNA of bacterium, for instance, contains as much information as a 1,000-page book. Information is defined by Webster's as knowledge communicated or received. Information contained in DNA is the same every single time. It never changes. If I were to take the DNA from your specific body and read it, it will stay the same from day to day to day. It will never change. Atheists never address where the actual information that's contained in your specific DNA comes from. They just address that it's there. And so that's what I mean when I stated in the beginning that they start from here and go outward. There's no known natural law through which matter can give rise of information. Neither is there any physical process or material phenomenon known that can do this. Heinz states an evolutionist belief claims that life arose from an organic soup. He goes on to ask how an organic soup knows the order of things so perfectly as to create life. Let's see. All the information I provided to you is lengthy and at least informative. We have touched on biogenesis, DNA, and information. With all of the facts I have provided, it It is time we start giving God the credit for creation and stop attempting to tell him he's wrong. It is time, imagine, fighting someone for credit for work they have done. God can definitely do it again, in or out of the laboratory. God the Creator should get credit for his creation. When you write a paper, an English teacher or intellectual scholars and writers from around the world will tell you to give a works cited page. If you look at the Holy Bible, view that as God's works cited page. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. John chapter 1, verses 3 through 4. That's my persuasive speech. And pen the audience. 10 minutes, is that right?
10 minutes. That was a good one, man.